morning, everyone. This is Kathy Mason from MasonWorks Marketing here on Conscious Business Zone with my friend Kelvin Chin. Hi, Kelvin.
Hey, Kathy. Good to see you.
Oh, I'm so glad to have you back. I always learn something when I'm with you. And I want everyone to know, I mean, here's all Kelvin's books. This one was the first one that I experienced when I think I met you at an Alliance conference, Overcoming the Fear of Death, which everyone should read this book. And this book is part of your work with your nonprofits that hopefully we'll get to talk about too. And then this one came out before this one, but they go together because this is the credibility for you writing this book, in my opinion. So anyway, so Kelvin, why don't, for people that are just meeting you, and I want to help them be part of the Kelvin Chin fan club. Could you tell them a little bit about your journey and about the infrastructure that you already have before we talk about what's coming up next?
Yeah, okay? Sure. So my journey this lifetime in the realm that we're talking about today, which we'll just call the self-development, spiritual development realm of life, started when I was a teenager and I learned to meditate. So I started to meditate in my late teens, and I've been meditating ever since. And I started not for spiritual reasons. I started for anxiety reasons. And so it turned my life around, the meditation did. And I got rid of my anxiety. So because it had helped me so much, I wanted to help other people. I learned how to teach meditation right away. I studied personally with Maharishi Mahesh Yogi in the early 1970s and a couple of times. And then I became a teacher with his organization. And so I taught TM, Transcendental Meditation, for about 10 years. They went off in different directions. I wanted to stay focused on teaching meditation. So I left and continued teaching meditation to this day. I've since removed all the cultural trappings from the teaching, and I've made it easier, 10 to 15 minutes each time, twice a day. But it's an easy technique, and I give him credit for being the guy who said that meditation should not involve focus, controlling the mind. It should not involve clearing the mind of thoughts. It should be easy and effortless. So I still give him public credit for that, being that guy, and I think that's how he'll be known historically, 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 years from now. My past life memories, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, started opening up completely spontaneously in the late 1970s. And I didn't even believe in reincarnation or past lives or any of that stuff at the time. And then in the mid 1980s, I started spontaneously opening up to the other side and started getting communications. Again, I didn't believe in that stuff either until it started happening to me. And I started connecting the dots. So that's kind of the overall journey. I started a nonprofit about 10 years ago when I left my legal career. I was in law firms and so forth. I went to law school, etc., after I taught meditation for 10 years. I started my nonprofit, and as Kathy mentioned, one of my nonprofit focuses is helping people overcome the fear of death. So the Overcoming the Fear of Death Foundation is one of my nonprofits, and the other is Turning Within Foundation, which is my meditation nonprofit. So I'm helping people worldwide now in 68 countries reduce their fears and increase their expansion of their conscious capacity of their mind, connect with loved ones on the other side, connect with themselves, etc., worldwide now.
Well, I've taken both your meditation class and your afterlife class, and I love learning from you. There's something about the field that you create that allows other people to tap into it. and release anxieties and just get clear so they can think clearly, which right now, if you're sensitive, this energy that we're in, it's an election year, plus there's all this change going on, and the sensitives are getting this global consciousness of like thrashing information, like I should do this or that. Like you can't even hardly make decisions
Yeah.
with the way the energies are. And I think the distractions of the phone and being on call for everyone all the time is really hard on people. It's almost like we're at the tipping point for something to happen with that.
Yeah, I would say that the energies that you're talking about, I would distill it down to one word: fear. There's a lot of fear in the world right now. And there's a lot of people, whether they be politicians, whether they be business people, whatever, who are taking advantage of that fear. And they're stirring it up even more. They're trying to get people motivated to do this or that. And I'm the anti-fear guy. I'm the let's reduce the fear. Let's get our anxieties reduced, in check, and removed from our lives so that we can have a more creative, peaceful world inside and outside.
Yes, yes. Well, I agree. I think that your work has given me a bigger perspective of all of the potential that we have as beings of light or energy beings during our physical incarnation. Because what's happened, we're going to talk a lot about this book today. Is once you realize that this isn't the only game over, but it isn't over. You get to start again, and that you can play full out. And see, the fear reduces the amount of participation in the dance of life.
Yeah.
This is a dance, and you have partners, and you create different scenarios, but you can grow out of that or release the part of the dance that's uncomfortable. You don't have to. You're not a victim of anything. You a co-creator. So could you talk a little bit about that, about how, because you started, and I've learned this from you many times, that you started meditation to quell your own anxieties because you were on the fast track for education, and there are a lot of pressures on you that you put on yourself to be a high performer. And you found meditation, TM, to be able to show up completely without being in terror. And then you took on big responsibilities. You were 17, 18, and you're in Southeast Asia helping Maharishi run divisions. I mean, so could you talk a little bit about that? Because that, I think right now, I don't know anyone that's not watching the play, the dramas that is an effect that can separate themselves very well from it.
So as you say, my journey this lifetime involved in, we'll call them big scenes in your play of life. You use that analogy. In big scenes started when I was very young. I was doing public lectures when I was 17, 18 years old. I was in Asia coordinating 8 countries when I was 22, 23 years old for his organization. I was teaching on the first meditation courses in the history of the U.S. Army on all the U.S. Army bases when I was 22, 23 years old in Korea, including on the demilitarized zone. So I would go on the Army base 22, 23 years old, and I get private housing, the Air Force bases, the U.S. Air Force bases, U.S. Army bases. because I had a letter from a general in the Pentagon who had learned to meditate, and it had lowered his blood pressure, and he had got off of his blood pressure medication. So he was calling all of these other generals around the world saying, you should check this out. And so that's why I kind of got catapulted, thanks to him, into these scenarios, we'll call them, where I was just a young kid walking onto army bases with the commanding officers calling me sir. So it was pretty wild, right? And then I taught the first meditation courses, as you know, in the history of West Point Military Academy here in the United States. A couple hundred people there, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's this lifetime. And then, you know, I had a legal career and so forth and so on. But connecting to that, this book that you mentioned, that I usually don't have my books on display, but I put this one up here on my little table here, this book here, because this is the one we're kind of focusing on today in our discussion out of my 3 books. But this one goes back 6,000 years. So I talk about my memories that reach back 6,000 years, about 24 lifetimes. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in this upcoming six-part series that's starting in a few weeks. But the point in terms of your question, the play of life, or the play of what I consider our eternal journey of many lifetimes, if we want to come back, we don't have to come back. So that's one point of confusion that a lot of people have. Nobody's making you come back to learn lessons or this and that. You can choose to come back, and you can choose to fix stuff in relationships. You can choose to learn from your lifetime, but not everybody does, right? But the point is, I've come back many times, and, you know, I remember a couple of dozen. I probably have had many, 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 many more lifetimes than that, thousands of lifetimes more than that. But what has that taught me about myself? And so that's one of the things I'm going to focus on in this 6-part series, is what can we learn about ourselves in this, what I consider an eternal journey, without beginning or end, is what eternity means. And how can we learn more about who we are? For what reason? To help us live life in the present, as you said, Kathy. That's the thing.
That's right. Well, that's what I'm hoping that people will understand why I'm so enthusiastic about your work, is that it's a mind changer. When you start realizing that the glimpses of other realities or other attributes, because a lot of times it's your character coming through, your personality, if you call personality, sometimes I call it character, that gift of your perspective, you may be getting hints of it, but you don't act on it, or you don't believe it, or you don't take the gift of it to heart. And that's the whole reason you're here, is the play and put you in as that part, as that being. And if you don't play that part, you're missing the whole genius. You're not expressing your genius so that everyone benefits, and especially you.
Especially yourself. Exactly. And it's a choice that we each make. That's what you're implying, is that it is a choice, and it can be a conscious choice. It's very often a subconscious choice. In other words, there are other things that play within our personal history that reaches back, in my experience, many thousands of years, maybe millions of years, whatever, that affect us now subconsciously. And those old emotional patterns are stuff that we can transcend them. We can actually go beyond the limitations of these old emotional patterns that drive many of us unconsciously, meaning without our conscious awareness. So it's not that we have to be consciously aware of every single thing that we did, and every mistake that we made, and every choice that we've made in the past. That's not necessary. But there are ways to unlock this, and that's what I talk about in my work, right?
Right. Well, someone on LinkedIn, it doesn't have their name on it, said, will real or imagined be discussed today?
So yeah, I mean, real or imagined. So why do I say that in the title? Because how do you know? How do you know if your afterlife experience, your NDE, your near-death experience, or your STE, your spiritually transformative experience, however you want to label it? I didn't even know that last label until Kathy and I met in 2019. I didn't even know that. STE, even though I'd had thousands of them. The previous 4 decades before 2019. These things happen, and how do we know if they're actually real, or did our imagination kind of conjure them up, or is it a combination of the two? Well, it was partially real and partially imagination. The thing is, I talk about that in the classes, and I help people discern. Discern means to distinguish, how to tell. That's the easy English, plain English language of what discern means, is how do you tell? How can you tell? How do you distinguish? And so I give people kind of a yardstick, kind of a metric, a step-by-step. Okay, look at this, and look at this, and how about this, and how about that? Is there any external corroboration, external source that can kind of verify, etc.? There's no absolutes to any of this experiential stuff that we're talking about, whether it's afterlife, past life, anything spiritually transformative. These are experiences that people are having, and they're unique to that person. So there's no absolutes, like there's an absolute right and wrong answer in a mathematical formula that you studied maybe when you were in high school, in 9th or 10th grade. There's a right and wrong answer. Okay, this is the right answer. That's the right and wrong answer. These things, however, these experiences, however, can be looked at to assess whether they are more real or more imagined. Is it absolutely, are we absolutely sure? We're never absolutely sure. But yeah, I give people a sense. I help people look at things. And we could talk a little bit, give people a little tidbit of that, in our session today, if you want to, Kelvin.
That'd be great. So I want everyone to get the feeling, hopefully from what I'm expressing, of how much these classes with Kelvin have enriched my life. The expansion of the possibilities, whether it's your real or imagined, even if your imagination is one of the biggest gifts you have. And the idea that you could do what if without it being in polarity. So much of the outside world, the education system, everything, as you said, it's binary. Whereas what happens with the work with Kelvin is the what if expands to why not. And then you get the courage to try new things because you've got these inklings, and they don't go away. If they are part of your path, you'll be subtly reminded over and over again. A book will fall off a shelf. You'll be watching a YouTube, and another YouTube will pop up. It just once it starts unfolding, the expansiveness of the possibilities of your interaction with Source never stop, in my opinion.
Yeah, let me comment on this. So,
Okay,
one thing that I do in the 6-part series and in all my classes with my students is I'll share experiences that I've had, and I'll share my doubts and what kind of doubts I had at certain points in a series of experiences that I have had that may stretch over months, years, decades. And I'll walk my students through how my perception and my assessment of the real or imagined issue changed, and why it changed, and how it changed, and what made it change for me. I use myself as a guinea pig, so to speak, as in a teaching modality way to my students to show, okay, this is what happened to me in 1977. This is what I was thinking then. And then sometime, I'm not exactly sure, I didn't keep a journal, but sometime in the early 1980s, here's how I started shifting and thinking about that same set of experiences that happened to me in 1977. Or how I started shifting 6 months later, or 6 years later, or 20 years later about that same experience. Because in this lifetime alone, I have a body of experiences that reaches back 50 years in this lifetime. And so I've kind of assessed, and in writing this book in particular, I kind of went back and tried to remember, and I talked to friends, and I said, where were we when this happened? Remember I told you that, and this happened? And then I kind of figured out and connected the dots as to when certain things had happened over this last 50 years. So that's a way that I teach in my students, and I share openly with them my own journey and my specifics of my own doubts.
Right.
So what do I do that for? I do that because my students then hear that, and they can transpose that and translate that into their own lives and start applying that same sort of principle and start looking at things through certain lenses that I share with my students. Mm-hmm. Right?
Right.
So why don't, Kathy, I just tell just a quick thing about some of the lenses that I suggest that people look through, because that'll address a little bit more specifically that person who asked that question about real or imagined. So first of all experiences are open to our own interpretation, right? Mm-hmm. So that's a given. That's pretty obvious. They're being interpreted by the person who had the experience. Based on that person's belief system, that's how they tend to filter it. That's why you see so many NDEs, people describing them, and they're saying, oh, I spoke with God, or I spoke with Jesus. But then you have this other group that you don't have a big group of here in the United States, because a lot of the stuff that I've seen online and so forth tends to be dominated by Americans, or let's say Christians. But you have this whole other group that I'm exposed to because I teach worldwide, who say, no, they saw Buddha, or they saw Maharishi, or they saw some other guru, because that's their lens that they look through life through. They don't look through the Jesus lens, okay? Right. Or the Muhammad lens. There's the Muhammad lens, and people say, oh, I saw Muhammad in my NDE. You don't see a lot of that on the American NDE sites on social media, okay? It's through that person's lens. It doesn't mean that it's absolutely Muhammad who greets you every time anybody else dies, okay? Or whoever, or it may not even be Maharishi or Muhammad or Jesus. It might be an angel of light who greets you, and the interpretation is through that person's belief system. It's an angel of light, it must be God. No, it might be an angel of light who's not Jesus or God or Muhammad or Buddha or whatever. So those are examples of interpretations. How do you know if those are right or wrong? You're never going to know if that's right or wrong. So I discourage people from trying to say who's right and who's wrong, real or imagined, about somebody's specific experience, because you got to understand it's going through their filter. And I think from a respect standpoint, we need to respect other people's belief systems and and therefore their filters. Right. It's their filter. It's not you. Right.
Right. Well, I think the benefit of all of that is the more that you hear other people's articulation of their multidimensional experiences, because that's the way I would phrase it, then you can maybe interpret, as you said, something happened to you at 20 you're going to interpret it different at 50. It's not just hindsight. It's a more expanded view of what this reality is and your place in it, and a more comfortable, usually, interpretation than you had maybe at 20, although you thought you knew everything back
Yeah.
then. But what happens is when you hear these other people, their articulation sometimes is the I'll give you an example. When I had a spiritually transformative experience, I saw God, source, as a river of light that it was fiery in places. It wasn't just all white. It was red and orange and yellow. It was very fiery. And I went into a healer's office, and she had painted a picture of it on her wall. And so I knew she had seen what I had seen. She didn't have to say a word. I just knew she had been to the place I had been. It was in a black void. This was there. I ended up being a tributary off of that river, and that happened over 20 years ago. And I still, when I'm listening to people, I'm still trying to interpret that. So that's what is really helpful about Kelvin's explanation, and being in a classroom where people are safe, feel very safe, talking about their experiences and are processing. You get to go, that's where that fits for me too. It's like you're not on the hot seat, but you get the benefit.
Yeah, and people share, as you're implying. People share in my classes their experiences and so forth. So it's not just me talking the whole time. It's, I have a presentation, I have certain material that we'll talk about that I cover. Mm-hmm. But it's very much a sharing and open, as you say, a safe place for people to say whatever about their own experiences and their mm-hmm. own journeys. And the thing is, what you just described, your experience, and then you go into this person's office and they have a picture that and it mirrors that. There are people who will have very similar experiences, and then there are people who will have very different experiences. And it's just there's a huge range is the point. There's not just one experience of the afterlife. Right. And that's an important takeaway for people, so that people are not feeling like, oh, mine's right, theirs is wrong, or mine's wrong and theirs is right. No, there is a huge range. And the bottom line, really, one of the things I talk about in my book is one of my character traits, to use your word. Personality traits is the phrase that I use, but character traits, same thing, is to be very practical. And so one of my practical points is, okay, Kathy had that experience. She walks into this woman's office. She still had a similar experience because she did some painting on the wall or whatever it was. And then maybe somebody else has a different experience. The point is this: it's not about determining whose experiences is right and wrong. The point is, what can we learn from this? What can we take away from all these different experiences we can have that can help us on a practical level live more freely in life with less suffering and more expansion and more happiness and contentment? That's the bottom line. And so in interpreting all these experiences, it's fun to do, but we need to remember it's not about right and wrong. It's about what can we learn about ourselves? What can we learn more about the universe? Because nobody can ever figure everything out. That's not part of my belief system, because eternity means forever learning too, or potentially, right? Forever growing. You don't stop. So you never, ever know everything about everything.
Right. Well, a lot of this is just perfect timing because of the opportunity to come to peace. You said suffering is optional. It's what Buddhism teaches as well. And we forgot that. We forgot that we we're not a victim, and we are sitting in the driver's seat, but we forgot to shift. So that's why I love your work. I think it's so empowering, and being in group again is empowering, but there's something about your access to this information that creates a platform for others to tap into that really is creates a comfort level that isn't available very many places. I mean, you can do meditation by yourself or listen to guided meditations or listen to music, but there's something about being in the group, meditating with you and taking classes with you that is quite profoundly peaceful. And if for people that are looking for that in their life and to expand their perspective of what this whole life is about, this class coming up, the Afterlife and Reincarnation Experiences, that's part of that goes with this book, is a gift. It's a huge gift.
I would say, Kathy, it's interesting you say it that way, because as I self-reflect and I just look at my own growth and development, we'll just call it, my own journey, I would say that within me anyway, that comes from a conscious awareness, memories that go back at least 6,000 years. Now around 8,000. Since I've written the book, I've had some memories that go back a couple of thousand years, even before the first one that I talk about in my book. But the point is, having all of these memories and perspectives of how the world, or how the world that I was in, you know, I didn't have the perspective of the whole world in every lifetime, but at least in these previous lifetimes, how the world that was around me at the time was operating, and how people thought, and how civilization was, and so forth, gives me a perspective that is very calming within me. And maybe, as you said, it transports other people into that calmness as well. Because once you see how much we've gone through over, let's say, 6,000 to 8,000 years, and who knows how much the humanity and planet Earth has gone through, what we've gone through over the last millions of years. But the point is that there's been growth, and there's been a lot of ups and downs. And I've seen a lot of ups and downs, and a lot of growth, and a lot of regression. I've been exposed to people who I know now, in today, 21st century Earth, 2024 planet Earth, who I remember being with 2,000 years ago, who have regressed. They have not progressed. And so, and they've kind of hunkered down and kind of given in to certain old emotional patterns and old fears and so forth. And that's a choice that they make. And I see them, and it breaks my heart, because I knew them 2,000 years ago. But it's a choice that they've made, and it's their comfort zone is to not grow that much, is to kind of stay in an old pattern and not see the possibility of growth. That's a choice people can make. Now, it's not a choice that you and I make, Kathy, but it's a choice that people can make. When we say choice, there's a huge range of, there's all manner of choices. But I try to help promote, as you say, a space where people can either, whether it's individually when I work with them in my coaching sessions privately, or whether it's in a class like we're talking about today that I'm going to start in a few weeks, try to promote a space where people feel safer to let go. Right. And as you know, in my meditation classes, that's what it's all about. It's about letting go and connecting with ourselves in a deeper, more transcendent way, deep within ourselves, because that's connecting. What we connect with ourselves within, that connects us with you and me and all of us in the universe on the outside, right?
Right. Right. Okay. So I want to ask, because you just quickly said, okay, so
Yeah.
in this wonderful book, there is a timeline of past lives. And Kelvin, if you can see that at 4,000 BC, he was a Sumerian businessman. And now he just on camera, just now, said he remembers 2,000 years before. Do you want to give us a little hint of what it was?
Yeah, sure. It's short. I was. I'm sure. I'm not sure if I was meditating or I was resting afterwards or something, and I started speaking in a language that I didn't recognize, but then I started getting visions of being a native, an indigenous person in the Southwest. So you know that I have this indigenous role as a shaman and as a leader in the Lakota tradition in the 1800s. But this one was, and I just got a sense, I don't know, and I talk about this in the classes, in a few weeks. I get into this in some detail, where I get these knowingnesses, I call them, just a knowingness, just that it was around 8,000 years ago. So it was ancient, and I remember I was climbing up in certain in the dwellings and so forth, and I was speaking this language that I didn't understand in 21st century. Kelvin Chin didn't understand, but that I was an indigenous person in the Southwest, and it was very arid. It was dry. I could see everything, the colors and everything, and I could see the landscape and so forth. So that's why it rang true to me. Again, this is an example, real or imagined, to the other person's question. I'm seeing things. It's arid. Okay, so and then I get a sense for how old it is. And is that real or imagined? It's at this point, it could be my imagination. We don't know. But at some points in some of the experiences I talk about here, I get outside corroboration from other people and other situations, other things that I put in the book. But yeah, that's what that was.
Well, thank you. Well, you heard it first here, guys. Well, so one of the things I wanted to ask about is karma.
Yeah.
So do you think, because looking through your lifetimes, you do have personality attributes, which I was calling character.
Same
and
thing.
Excuse me?
Same thing.
Yeah. How does karma work with all of this? I mean, when you're talking about also the people being able to expand each lifetime and learn from each lifetime, the reason why I ask is I just did a karma clearing with a wonderful healer, and I really could tell the difference that it changed. It like rippled through what I would consider lifetimes. I could tell that attribute that we cleared, that I chose to clear and then cleared, you could feel it almost go like dominoes.
So what you're describing, I don't call that karma.
Oh, okay.
I call that clearing out old emotional patterns, is the phrase that I use. Again, I like to use plain English as much as possible, as opposed to spiritual jargon. Karma can be used in the way that you're using it. The problem is a lot of people don't use it the way we're talking about it. A lot of people view karma as an accounting system, because that's how it's kind of changed over the millennia in the Indian culture to mean. So people in the West may or may not understand the original thinking about this word karma as meaning an accounting system that keeps track of basically who's naughty and who's nice, the Santa Claus thing. But seriously, keeping track of what did you do good, what did you do bad, and then there's this accounting system that exists somewhere in the universe, and they made this up. Okay, this was made up in the Indian culture several thousand years ago. The origins of the word karma were just to mean consequence. Karma in Sanskrit literally translates to action. That's all it means. Action. Karma means action. And so you do something, you act, you do something. Does it have a consequence? Yes. So that was the original meaning and intention of using it like 10,000 years ago when the spiritual teachers kind of first came up with this notion of karma. But over the millennia since then, it's been kind of devolved, in my opinion, to mean this, oh, but there's something somewhere or somebody somewhere or somebody's keeping track or some in energy, there's like an abacus somewhere in the universe keeping track of something. No, there is no such thing as karma that way. Emotional patterns can get locked up within us, however, due to actions that we do, choices that we make that may have been hurtful to us or hurtful to other people or something. So if you want to use karma in that looser way, sure. But see, I like to use emotional patterns because it takes it out of this whole misinterpreted idea of karma being an accounting system.
It was emotional patterns, and it was apparently ancestral. But I could recognize it enough that I could identify it and work it. Yeah, it was really cool.
Yeah.
So and I do think that that's part of what you get with your course as well, is that what you realize is once you start being open to the fact that you don't really die, that no one's really that the judgment of your life review comes from you judging you, not some guy up on a cloudy throne.
Right.
That's the first thing, is that, when you realize you don't really die. So the first book helps you do that. And then this book helps you figure out how to incorporate the other inclinations that you realize are popping through from timelines into this reality and do something about it.
Right. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Right. Do something about it is the key words, right? Because we can choose to do something about it. We're not, as you said earlier several times, we're not victims structurally. We can choose to be victims. Some people do. A lot of people do. But it's not a structural part of the universe where you are on Earth, you're a victim now, and you're sent there for punishment reasons or something. There's spiritual groups out there who think that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, and that's what we're seeing is as science and spirituality become more matched up again after eons, after centuries or millennia of separation. You are seeing it. Your thoughts do make an effect on your reality. And what you're offering is an opportunity to get back to the creative thoughts so you can co-create and problem solve at a really high level. Yeah. And that's what we need, I believe.
Let me give people a specific perspective that I have that permeates throughout this 6-part series classes. And that is that there is more similarity between this side and the other side than people realize. Yeah. People go, wait a minute, you don't have a physical, biological body over there. That's true. So there's some basic fundamental differences, okay? But the way things operate on the other side are not as structurally specific as a lot of people teach in their spiritual classes. And the reason they do that, I think, is for various reasons. But one of the reasons of that misinterpretation is people are looking for control, because they see that living on planet Earth is so open to so much free will choices by ourselves and by other people that they sometimes, as you've said, Kathy, feel like they're a victim. They're a victim here, and they're out of control. And so when spiritual teachers see that, they kind of, and when angels on the other side see that, one way to get bigger followings, the angels can get bigger followings by telling psychic mediums on this side that, oh, there's all these levels on the other side, and it's very organized, and you go through this level, and then you graduate to this level, and then if you do this, you graduate that. That's not the case in my experience. That it actually is different, but similar, more similar to here than people realize. Why do I say that? Why I say that is to point out to my students that if you are a self-aware being, the more self-aware you can make yourself on this side, the more self-aware you're going to be on the other side, and the more you'll be able to take advantage of the differences that exist on the other side than here. And so you will be less controllable on the other side by controlling beings who do exist on the other side. Independence. I teach independence in my students. I encourage independence. But independence comes from a certain level of self-confidence within and a certain understanding within that one can control one's own life, one's own destiny, so to speak, on either side, this side or the other side.
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't know if that helps.
Yes, that's the key to having courage to show up as a totally different being than we've been accustomed to, because it's time to rock and roll. In my opinion. Okay, so should we show the website a little bit? So I hope you guys can see how exciting this opportunity is, to have a group of people around you that are encouraging you to discover who you really are at a high level, and then give you the launching pad to do something with it. I think it's really powerful. I just can't say enough good things about it. So here we go. I'm going to share this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
this is from my website. Kathy's showing you here.
Right.
So you go to kelvinchin.org, and it describes the 6-part series in depth. And there are several videos. There's some testimonials there from students who've taken this over the last 6 years. I've been teaching this. I teach it about once or twice a year, and now. And there's several short preview videos here you can watch where I talk in a little bit more detail about what the class involves and so forth. And then there's the 6-part topics here that a little bit right here. Okay. So people can see the topics that are discussed. So what happens when we die? We talk about in session 1. And we get into some specifics about what it's like when one dies, what it's like when one's dying, when one's transitioning, because we never really die. But, we use that term, dying in terms of transitioning. In the second session, we get into talking about experiences that people can have, NDEs, OBEs, and STEs. So near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, and spiritually transformative experiences. And those are all glimpses, you could say, into the other side from this side. And then in the third session, I get into reincarnation, which we've talked about today. The fourth session, rewards and punishment, hell, karma, dharma, and sin. So we briefly talked about karma today. We get into dharma. This is a Sanskrit word that means duty, but it has also been misinterpreted and morphed into some other things. We talk about that. And we talk about where did this idea of hell and punishment come from and so forth. We talk a little bit about the history of the Bible and so forth, and how that got into the Bible, because it was never in the original form of the Bible. Can our friends and loved ones communicate from the other side? Session 5. Short answer is yes.
Yes.
We talk about that, but we also talk about that in terms of the very important point, and I give examples of this, of being able to distinguish when the information is useful and helpful and when it is self-serving from the source of the information from the other side. And that's an important distinction to make, because a lot of people, I've seen this widespread in most spiritual circles, they get communication from the other side. They assume that it's useful, helpful, correct. And that is an incorrect, naive, I understand why. I understand the innocence of it, but it is not appropriate. And you really need to discern and distinguish what's useful for you and not just blindly follow anybody, including somebody like me on this side. Don't blindly follow whatever I say. And I say that in the first session. But don't blindly follow anything that you hear from the other side, which most people do, unfortunately. Number 6, what part of us continues after our body dies? And we get into that in some detail in terms of what continues. In these sessions, and you can see the dates of the sessions there, it's every other Sunday. It's going to start on September 29th at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 o'clock in the Eastern time zone, and across the world at different in different time zones. But it's every other Sunday at the same time. Nobody is ever turned away for financial reasons. Those words mean what it says. And if somebody is unemployed, or they just are on fixed income, or they're in another part of the world that is not the United States of America, even within the United States, I never turn anybody for financial reasons. But there are other economic systems in other countries that, where people only make $500 a year. Well, I'm not going to charge them, the same rate, and so forth and so on. Nobody ever gets turned away for financial reasons. So you just send me a message, an email, or whatever. Okay. But that helps helps me with the nonprofit. This book is homework for people to read. Now, you don't have to read the whole book before the class starts, but I do recommend that they start reading it, because I'm going to do this class. And for those people, some of people here watching this may have already taken this, one of the sessions that I've done over the last 6 years. I'm going to do this one a little bit differently this time, this series. And I'm going to talk about these different, weave in different lifetimes of myself and other people, a lot of other people who I know. I'm going to weave in from whom I have permission, weave in the other lifetimes from into the discussion to give examples, teaching examples to people that would help open them up, the people who are attending the session, perhaps open them up to their own past lives. So by giving people insights into some of these lifetimes in a different way than I have in the past, rather than just telling you, oh, I had this lifetime as this person, so forth, getting into more of the nitty-gritty detail about what I learned about myself from that lifetime. What emotional pattern, to use that phrase that Kathy and I have been using today, what emotional pattern was unlocked, and how did that get unlocked, and so forth. By talking about these emotional patterns may help some of you who may attend this class open up your past lives, not by doing a past life regression, but by coming in through the source of the issue that may be blocking you. In other words, your emotional pattern.
Right. Perfect.
All right.
Perfect. That's why I was so excited to have you on, to help more people know about this opportunity, because everyone can benefit from it. It really is a tremendous opportunity to get deeper into your belief systems, clear cobwebs in them, and expand it. The other part that we're not going to go into today that I benefited a lot from this class was the 30th of November recordings, which that's just a little hint, you guys. You need to go to the class to find out more about that. But what happens is you can see how beautifully orchestrated a lot of this experience here is. It's beautifully orchestrated for your highest good, and it might help you reframe things that have happened to you in this lifetime, and get the learning nuggets out of it, right?
Yeah. Kathy's referring to a talk that I helped organize in 2014 called the 30th November talk, 30th November. You can just Google that, or you can just Google my name and you'll see it pop up. But it's a talk that I helped organize, and my friend George Hammond gave the talk, and he got a download first, and then several of us got other downloads from the other side about the history of spirituality on Earth for the last 10,000 or so years. So that's just a little tidbit. Yeah.
Yes. Well, if people are looking for the truth and they haven't really landed with any of the spiritual teachings out there, there may be a reason that they need to have this class as a basis to find their truth in order to integrate it.
Yeah, because everybody's truth is different, right?
That's right.
And so what I'm teaching is not that this is the truth. What I'm teaching is, let's get our act together individually, and our discernment, our ability to distinguish, our ability to think more clearly. That's what discernment, you can also think of that as just thinking more clearly. And then you go to a class, then you can say, oh, they're saying this, that doesn't make sense with this. I teach people how to distinguish and see where some spiritual teachers are trying to stick a square peg into a round hole. But if you don't have the basis, if you don't have the fundamentals, you don't even see that it's square, and you don't even see that the hole is round. So what I'm teaching is teaching people how to see those differences, those distinctions. And then you can go into life, whether it's on this side or the other side, and you will have such a more clear mind to make up your own decisions. That's what I teach, is how to distinguish better so that you can make your own decisions. Not me make them for you. Nobody can make them for you. You'd make them. But I can help you. But I help people get clarity of mind. That's
right. And that's what I really think we're missing right now. It's quite apparent as you're watching the outside world unfold, and getting maybe like a river getting thrown in the river and falling along with it. This gives you a chance to step back, find your center, and really do some inner work that is fun. This doesn't have to be a very difficult shadow work type of thing. Your shadows do show up, and they do reintegrate, or that energy is used for something else, or the void of it it creates an opening for something else. But it is not scary. The scariest thing for all of us is to speak about it in public.
Yeah.
And you create a safe place for us to do that.
Yeah. And you talk about shadows. I mean, everybody has shadows or negative. I think of them more as restrictive, limiting it. That's the phrase that I tend to use.
Perfect.
Restrictive or limiting self-views or belief systems or whatever. And the issue is we don't even have to delve deeply into those. I'm not into a psychoanalysis approach of these things. I'm into just moving past them. Once we recognize them, we can let them go, because the realization, the reality here in this situation in terms of self-development and self-growth is that by recognizing it, and it can often be enough to move past it. It doesn't have to be a reliving of the past. Sometimes that happens, and sometimes I've talked about those instances where it has happened to me in my journey. But my own experience and my belief in this, based on not just my personal experience, but having helped 5, 6, 7,000 people over the last 40 years in their own journeys this lifetime, is that there's a self-regulatory mechanism within each human being, within each human consciousness. There's a self-regulatory mechanism. What do I mean by that? When we're ready, things will open up. If we're not ready, they won't. So that this notion of being hurt, you could say, or the phrase I use is limited by an opening of an experience, tends not to happen so often, because the system, our nervous system, our consciousness, the human consciousness, tends to regulate itself. And not everybody, therefore, for example, may open up to their past lives about when they died and how horrifically they died in a past life. Some people may open up to that, but most people are not. Why? Because I think, in my experiences, that their self-regulatory mechanism is operating to kind of protect them from that trauma.
Right.
Kathy, I have had many memories of being killed. Well, not many, but I've had some memories of being killed. But I don't have a fear of death. Somebody who has a really, really deep fear of death, they're probably not going to go there, and their consciousness is not going to go there because of this, what I call this self-regulatory mechanism. So I say this so that people should not be afraid. I am the anti-fear guy, because opening up does not necessarily mean opening up a can of worms to every worm that you've ever had in your past.
No, this is a great opportunity. It isn't something to be frightened of. In fact, it's the safest environments for you to explore things that you may not have even known about, but will give you so much more joy in this lifetime. The opportunity is there.
And sometimes in a surprising way.
Right.
Very often people will come out of the classes and they'll go, wow, I didn't even expect that, whatever that is. And then they'll feel so much more open just from having taken the classes. So that there's a lot of surprises that happen in a very, we could say, effortless way.
Yes.
As well.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So everyone, Kelvin, you have it on your name here, kelvinchin.org. That's the best way for them to find out everything you do, because there's lots more than this class. But please do yourself a favor, check out Kelvin as a resource for you, for your growth to really show up in a big way, and have a lot more fun with your life.
That's the thing. Life is meant to be enjoyed. We're meant to be, I think that's why I came here, to enjoy life, to enjoy certain relationships. I talk about some of the relationships that I have had with my children in past lives, and now again this lifetime, and some other friends of mine. And I think that that's a reason why many of us come back. But life is meant to be enjoyed. That's, to me, if people talk about what's the purpose of life, the meaning of life, whatever, that's the way I look at it. How can we enjoy life more and enjoy life in a physical, biological body? And some people have challenges in their physical, biological body. And I understand, and my heart goes out to people who have certain issues that they're born biologically with. But to the extent possible, we can and should, I feel, try to enjoy life here on planet Earth as much as possible.
Yeah.
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 So I
Okay.
try to help people.
Well, we're over time, so we need to finish. But everyone, please go to kelvinchin.org and see all the different ways that Kelvin can help you. And I highly recommend you. Any of his books are great, but this is the one that is being featured in the class, and it will be an eye opener for you if you're at least a little bit curious about it. Go for it. Go for it. And as Kelvin said, he doesn't turn anyone away. So you'll see that, and no one knows when you're in a class who's there as a free person versus a paid person. But the benefit for you to enjoy your life and finish this year in a totally different mindset is real. It's real. So please do yourself a big favor.
Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you, dear. Love
Thanks.
you. Thank
Good to
you
see you.
very much.
Thank you.
Mhm.